My name is Dr. Carlos Perez. I'm excited to welcome you from Nova Southeastern University. Today we have a very special presentation. We're featuring Dr. Shannon Karl, and she's going to be speaking on a very popular topic, the topic of love. I think that nothing else could be more appropriate. So we are very excited to hear all about you, and we're going to have a full presentation, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers. I will be on personally to answer any questions after this presentation. So, Dr. Karl, I'm going to sign off and let you have it.
Okay, welcome everybody. I am honored to spend a little bit of time with you this afternoon talking about love. What I'm going to go ahead and do right now is share my screen. So give me just a second to do that, and we'll get started with the PowerPoint. Here we go. And love. As I was preparing for this presentation, I thought, wow, what a great topic, and what perspective did I want to take and to share during the time that we have together. And so you'll see in just a second that I'm going to focus on the interpersonal aspects of love. I wanted to give just a quick bit of background about myself. I'm an associate professor with our College of Psychology at NSU. I'm a proud full-time faculty member in the Department of Counseling, and my specialty area is clinical mental health counseling. And then there's a photo of me without my, I have a student that calls my headset my Delta pilot headgear that I'm wearing to make sure that the sound is good. So this quote by Lao Tzu, I think, nicely sums up the enormity and the depth of love, and that is, being deeply loved by someone gives you strength, while loving someone deeply gives you courage. This next photo selection may be a surprising one for me to start off with, so let me explain it just a little bit. This is a picture taken by one of my daughters a few years ago. This is in front of the guards barracks at the concentration camp Dachau outside of Munich, Germany. I've had the great opportunities throughout my career to present and participate in the European branch of the American Counseling Association annual conference that's held for U.S. and English-speaking counselors that are living and working in Europe. And during one of my trips to the European branch of ACA, I was able to take my daughters, and we traveled to Dachau to pay our respects and to learn and to bear witness and to remember. The reason that I wanted to start off today with this photo is because if you look closely at the wrought iron symbols that are now permanently and irrevocably in front of what used to be the guards barracks, you will see people reaching out and holding on to each other. They are what we need to remember, that these were people that lived and loved deeply. There's a wonderful book called Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl. I'm going to type that in right now into the chat box. Some of you may be familiar with it, have already had the opportunity to read it, Man's Search for Meaning, Dr. Viktor Frankl. Dr. Frankl was a psychiatrist living in Austria prior to World War II, and he happened to be of the Jewish faith. And unfortunately, when the rise of the Nazi powers came into place, he and his entire family were interred in concentration camps. Dr. Frankl spent his time separated from his family and trying to figure out how he could survive one of the most horrific experiences that human beings can endure. And so what he did was he used his psychiatric training to log information and stories and narratives. He kept copious diaries of interviews with individuals that were also interred, and he would ask over and over again, tell me, what is it that keeps you going? What is it that keeps you going in spite the most horrific of circumstances? And the answers over and over and over again, and he outlines this in Man's Search for Meaning, was hope and love. The hope that they would be liberated and reunited with their family members and their loved ones. And so I wanted to start off with this picture and with this message that at the end, the only thing that matters is the love that we've shown to others and to ourselves. And that it is, in the words of Friedrich Nietzsche, he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. And the why is the love of the people in our lives. So the question then is, what is love? For the purposes of the next few minutes, we're going to talk about love in the interpersonal romantic sense. I see Emily saying, what is love, baby, don't hurt me. Yes, I like that. Love is difficult to define. It is a special attitude. It's got behavioral components. It's got emotional components. It means different things to different people, and it's very hard to measure. It's almost easier to measure what love is not as opposed to what love is. Love is not pain, to reference Emily's comment, or it shouldn't be when it's in its best form. Just a brief note about the brain and love. There was an old commercial, and I'm probably dating myself here, but there was an old commercial about your brain on drugs, and they would fry up eggs in a frying pan and scramble them up and say, you know, this is your brain on drugs. Well, to some extent, love in the very beginning is exactly that. The brain is giving off all types of chemicals and neurotransmitters. You can see the list there of just a combination that allows us to feel that initial sense of euphoria and passion. There's a good YouTube video. We don't have enough time to show it today, but there's a good YouTube video called The Chemistry of Love, The Science of Love, just a couple minutes long. It talks about the neurotransmitters that are involved. And interestingly enough, one of the things that our scientific research has showed us is that in love in the interpersonal romantic sense can sometimes have such strong feelings of passion because it leads to commitment. And when a couple is committed and they have children, then they are more likely to stay together and to raise those children. So sociological research shows that there is a biological reason that we feel love. And John, you're absolutely right about love because of the neurobiological effects. That is certainly an element of it. Types of love. Again, we're still thinking about the interpersonal romantic sense. You can see the little cartoon picture that I had put in. I only thought about you once today. I never stopped. I wanted to start off talking about the types of love with passionate love, also known as infatuation. Open question to the audience. Thinking back, if you can, to a time either long ago or in the recent past when you felt infatuated. You felt that. I only thought about you once today, and it was all day throughout the day. Infatuation and that passion happens most often in the very beginning of the relationship. Again, you see those neurobiological effects from the previous slide that we were talking about, and it lends to very intense psychological feelings and generalized physiological arousal. There's typically a strong kind of sexual desire component in the very early phases of a romantic relationship. There's that avoidance of conflict and the feelings of completeness. In that classic movie, Jerry Maguire, Renee Zellweger's character tells Tom Cruise's character, you know, you complete me. And that's a very poignant and important moment. But sometimes that's part of infatuation. And one thing that's important for us to remember as mental health professionals and also as human beings that engage in interpersonal romantic relationships is that it is short-lived. So that high level of passion and infatuation cannot maintain itself. The neurotransmitters cannot stay to that same level. It is, they necessarily come down, and so the passion fades, but it doesn't have to fade completely. I want to talk for just a minute or two about the intensity of love and Rubens' love scale. So Rubens did some research on love and identified three primary components. Attachment to others. Feeling a sense of belonging and connectedness comes under the umbrella of attachment. Caring, of course, caring about someone else, and sometimes caring about someone else as much or even more than you care about yourself. And so that caring, that wanting good things, that wanting happiness for your intimate partner is an important piece of it. And then Rubens also says that intimacy is a necessary component, and that intimacy, that being able to open up and trust somebody enough to share dreams, hopes, vulnerability, your mind, your emotions, your body, all of those things. So intimacy is a very important component as well. And what Rubens said at the end of the day, when it comes right down to it, that the difference between being in like, and for any of you that have adolescents or young people in your families, in your lives, or in your professional work, knows that sometimes it's easy to confuse being in like for being in love. What Rubens said is the way to be able to differentiate that is through the intensity of it. And so that's an important thing to remember. So the intensity of it is what can separate being in like from being in love. One of the challenges for young people, though, is that everything they feel is so intense that's how being deeply in like can be mistaken for being in love. Switching gears just a little bit to talk about Sternberg and Sternberg's triangular theory. You can see I put a little picture of Joan Crawford there saying, if you want the girl next door, go next door. Passion is what Sternberg said. When we have Sternberg's triangle, and there'll be a diagram coming up in the next slide related to this, that passion is one of the components of that triangle, and we talked about that in its relation to infatuation. Another point to the triangle in Sternberg's theory is intimacy. That being able to open yourself and be vulnerable and to share hopes and dreams and thoughts and fear and pain, and to share the idea and the essence of who you are with somebody and to have them share in return. That's a critical piece. You know, in the field of mental health counseling and the helping professions, we talk a lot about therapeutic intimacy and allowing our clients to have the opportunity to be in a safe environment where they can share all of those things and they can open up and be intimate. The difference is, in a therapeutic environment, that's a one-way street. The client is opening up and sharing and disclosing and processing things with the therapist present, but the therapist is not reciprocating. It's that reciprocation that makes the difference, the qualitative difference in an interpersonal relationship outside of work. And then Sternberg also talks about commitment, that willingness to stay with somebody through the good times and the bad. There's a reason that vows are said in marriage and commitment ceremonies, and that's because it's easy to be together when the passion is there and the rose-colored glasses are on, but sometimes it can be harder when the day-to-day struggles of life or some of the harder life challenges come into place. So another piece of Sternberg's triangle is that commitment. And you can see the diagram up on the screen right now, and I'm going to take just a minute to talk about the different components. So we discussed passion already. You can see that here in the red area. Here's the passion point. And so what Sternberg says is that passion alone is infatuation. So if you have just passion, you are infatuated, per Sternberg's theory. Now, if we come up here to intimacy, it says intimacy alone is liking. And that is really, if you think about it, a friendship. If you think about the good friends that you have in your life, positive, deep, rewarding friendships involve all of that sharing and all of that vulnerability, the hopes, the fears, the pain, the dreams, the good and the bad, and there's reciprocity to that in a friendship. But there is not the physical passion, and then there is not the commitment to move through life together, typically with our peer groups and our friends. But that's what intimacy alone is liking up here. And then we go down to the bottom right and we look at commitment. So what Sternberg says is, he calls it empty love, and that is commitment alone. So you have two people that are committed to each other, but they don't have intimacy. There's not that depth of sharing and vulnerability, and they also don't have that physical passion. Now, what we hope for all of our relationships is that all of our interpersonal romantic relationships is that none of them are just these points. So the next level is when you have 2 out of the 3. And so if we look over here to the left, Sternberg is talking about romantic love, which is intimacy and passion together without the commitment. What I like to say about romantic love is a lot of times that's what happens at the very beginning, that falling in love period, where you have that passion. Your brain is on the drugs of love, and you're also having those deep conversations that can last as long as time allows. That's a very special time, but romantic love does not have that commitment into the future, and so that's an important piece to think about. I think about maybe a vacation affair or a cruise ship love, where you've got that passion and that intimacy, but you know that for some reason it is going to come to an end. So that's why there's 2 pieces to the triangle, the intimacy and the passion for romantic love. And then on the other side of the triangle, we have companionate love. That is intimacy and commitment without the passion. One might argue that there are a lot of relationships, especially long-standing relationships, that have moved into the phase of companionate love. And there's no judgment related to that. Of course, we all hope for all 3, but 2 out of 3 ain't bad sometimes. And passion can be brought back, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. So you have companionate love where you have intimacy and commitment, but the passion is either not there or it has faded. I was thinking about my grandparents as I was preparing for this presentation, and I was thinking about companionate love. They had been married before they passed for 60 years and had all that intimacy and had that commitment, and they had 5 children together, so I'm sure at some point they had that passion, but towards the end it was very much companionate love, and it was lovely. So I wanted to make sure to share that as an example. And then the final of the 2 sides is what Sternberg called fatuous love, which is passion and commitment without intimacy. And probably the best example that I can give of fatuous love is kind of the classic Disney movies where, and it's always going to be the princess and the prince, right, where Snow White marries her prince. Sleeping Beauty marries her prince. Cinderella gets married to Prince Charming. But they don't really have had the time to know each other and to develop that intimacy. Now that can come, but in the very beginning when you go right into a marriage and there are all of those romantic feelings, until the intimacy is able to evolve and develop, and that's something that takes time, it's fatuous love. And then in the middle of the triangle is what I think that we're all hoping for in our interpersonal lives, and that we hope for our loved ones as well, and that is consummate love, where you have intimacy and passion and commitment. And within any specific relationship, consummate love can be achieved, and it can be lost, and it can be achieved again, because one thing that we do know is that interpersonal relationships do require work and time and care. Speaking of time, here's a nice chart, I think, that depicts love over time, and it underscores a little bit of what I was just talking about. So if you see here the purple line that I'm going to trace with my arrow, that's passion. So passion right out of the gate skyrockets up. And then it kind of peaks, and then it'll slope off pretty quickly, and then it levels out, and as you can see towards the end of this diagram, it starts to uptick just a little bit, but it really has a very steep kind of rise and a fairly steep kind of decline too, but it doesn't typically decline all the way down. So that's the purple line. And then we have intimacy, and intimacy's got kind of a nice steady slope over time. You get to know people better, you learn about their histories and their stories. There's nothing that can replace spending time together and quality time together, and you see that with the orange line for intimacy. And then finally with commitment. Commitment typically takes time to build, and that once it does build, it stays. Right. So you can see that as far as love over time. Now, in looking at this, I don't want to give the impression that passion, that the future for love relationships is passionless. I think that that is far from the truth. I think that there is passion that does still stay, but sometimes it has to be nurtured and attended to and made time for. Switching gears just a little bit to talk about attraction. Why are we attracted to the people that we are? And the research shows that some of the reasons that we're attracted to people are because of similarities. Specifically, we're more likely to be attracted to people that are similar to us in our level of physical attractiveness. I always like to use my little brother as an example, and I love him very much, and I think that he is a great catch for anybody, but he has taken a long time to realize what league he plays in romantically, because he was always disappointed in his romantic relationship, because he always wanted, when he was younger and he would go to a party or to a bar or whatever, he always wanted to only meet up with the most beautiful woman in the room. And he would leave invariably disappointed. And the research supports that, that typically people pair off with others that are in the same level of physical attractiveness. And I think that we've all seen that with different relationships that we can observe sociologically. And if we haven't, and this is a rhetorical question, but think about, have you ever known a couple that appeared to be a little bit disparate in physical attractiveness? One member of the couple was significantly more attractive than the other. It makes you think about why. I always try and think, well, the less attractive member of the couple probably has some really cool things going on, personality-wise, temperament-wise, humor-wise, all of those. But typically we are attracted to and are attracted by individuals that are in the same range as we are. Also, similarities in age, educational status, and religion, in addition to race and ethnicity. The question becomes why? Why is this the case? And I certainly don't want to put out the impression that opposites don't attract and that having divergence in any of these characteristics isn't good, because it is. But the research shows that for some reason we tend to be attracted to people that are more like us as opposed to less like us. And the reason why, theoretically, is that we share similar interests in activities. We can have better communication when we have that common ground. We can confirm our own views and experiences. I have a colleague who's a professor at a school in Tennessee, and I did a work project with her in the fall during the past presidential election, and she looked at me and she goes, "I'm in a mixed marriage." And so I was quiet because I wasn't sure what she was referring to, what was different between her and her partner, and she said, "I mean politically mixed." And so we agree to disagree, and we just don't talk about it. And I thought that that was a good example of confirming one's own views and experience as to why you want people that share the same belief system as you do, and because you're supportive of each other's values and beliefs. I like Emily's comments about what she's saying is it because we're affected by, we see into each other how we see ourselves, and I think that that's a really astute kind of perception. I'm going to type one more time the word intimacy, and if you think about it, intimacy, when you look at that word spelled out and you say it slowly, it can be into me, I see you. Okay, next slide. Reciprocity. When somebody likes us, we tend to like them back. I used the picture of the eye in this slide because eye contact a lot of times among human beings can be kind of some of the first messages that there is perhaps a deeper interest or a curiosity. And so if you are finding yourself wanting to make eye contact with somebody that you may be attracted to and vice versa, sometimes that's how it starts. But the most important thing is that reciprocity. It's easy to care about somebody when they care about us. It's harder to care about somebody and to maintain that when they don't care about us. And there's a reason for that. It's self-protective. So we are more likely to be attracted to and to begin relationships with people that also share that attraction to us. It increases our self-esteem, and it increases the likelihood of the relationship enduring. Friendship also very much increases the likelihood of relationship endurance. Okay, intimacy for just a minute, and sex and love. I have a couple of questions, and because of the time that we're working with today, I'm just going to kind of put them out there for you to reflect on and you to think about as it applies to either your personal life or your work. And that is, does sexual intimacy deepen a love relationship? My question to the group is it necessary to deepen a love relationship? Sternberg feels like passion is for consummate love, but is passion always linked to sexual intimacy? So just something to think about. Do men and women have different views of sex and love? There's research that supports that as far as biological reasons for engaging in sex, and that in general, and I always try and be careful not to be stereotypical, but in general, men are looking for the physical elements of sex, and women in general are looking for more of the emotional elements of sex, although both elements are extant for both genders. And then my final kind of question to the group is, does this picture depict what sexual intimacy is? And I think that sometimes it can depict that, but not necessarily. There are great different ways of sexual expression and variety. It does not have to be a man and a woman. It does not have to be in any type of specific configuration. And in some cultures, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention cultural differences in relationships and in sexual expression. In some cultures, the picture that we're looking at now with the woman on top would not be appropriate. In some cultures, being completely nude during the sexual act would not be appropriate. So I wanted to spend just a minute kind of bringing this up because it's important for us to have as broad a view as possible about what intimacy is, about what sexual expression is, and it does not have to be intercourse between a man and a woman in the traditional sense. There's so much more variation of love expression and physical intimacy. So what makes a quality relationship? Characteristics of high-quality, intimate relationships, and this is what we're all striving for. Supportive communication. As a rule, if positive messages occur 5 times more than negative messages. That is good supportive communication. So you want to have positive messages times 5. Supportive communication. So if you need to give feedback really to anybody, but in the context of this presentation to an intimate partner, bring in positives before you bring in an area of development or a negative element. Companionship, high quality intimate relationships. The people that are involved care about each other and want to be together. They are true companions in life. Sexual expression and variety, we talked about that a little bit in the last slide, whatever that means for the individual couple. And then seeing the partner as a best friend. This is an important piece. That friendship is something that will carry a relationship through the challenges that life will necessarily bring. And having a partner as a best friend is one of the most important qualities for a successful relationship over time. And then maintaining that frequent positive interaction, that kind of 5-to-1 ratio that I was just mentioning. Impasses. So what happens if you get to a point where you and your partner are at an impasse and you just cannot agree, whatever the topic is? One thing that's important to know is talking may not solve every problem. Sometimes it is agreeing to disagree. It's always important to maintain respect and the integrity for who your partner is as a person, and to keep that in mind even when anger arises, because when anger comes, it can allow us the veiled opportunity to say things that are hurtful out of the excuse of anger. And I think it's very important for all of us, whether it be in our interpersonal relationships or any relationships, to make sure that anger does not take control. Additional steps you can take is you can take a break from an argument or a hot topic. You can agree to disagree and not come back to it, or you can take a break and come back to it at a time where cooler heads may prevail. And then, of course, I would be remiss to my profession and for those of you that are with us that are also in the mental health or related professions. I believe in the transformative power of counseling. I believe that couples counseling can and does make great differences. Sometimes the research on couples counseling is a little bit disheartening if you look at kind of longitudinal research as far as couples staying together or not, but there's a counter argument that couples that present for counseling a lot of times will wait until the relationship is already heavily damaged before presenting for counseling. So I always like to advocate for preventative counseling, pre-commitment counseling, and also maintenance counseling. If we think about it, hopefully we're all getting physical checkups on a regular basis. We're going to the dentist. Maybe we're taking our car in for an oil change or a tune-up. Maybe we should do that with our relationships as well. So I wanted to make sure that I touched on that. And as we look to wrap up for my portion of today's session, I really wanted to end with the diversity piece because there has been a lot of research on couples and interpersonal love, but up until the recent past, a lot of it has been on traditional married heterosexual couples that are homogenous, i.e. they have more similarities than differences. The field has changed, society is changing, and it's important that we're aware of research on love and interpersonal relationships in all of its forms. On the bottom left of this slide, you can see this couple. These are the Lovings. Some of you may be familiar with their story. This was an Oscar-nominated movie this year, and the Lovings were an interracial couple that just wanted to be married, and they wanted to live in a state where it was illegal, and they took their battle, a quiet couple. Their battle ended up going all the way to the Supreme Court and winning rights for other couples like them. And then on the bottom right, love is love is love. And I wanted to finish with the quote from Hermann Hesse: "If I know what love is, it is because of you. We learn of love from each other, and we grow through our love of each other. And I think that's it for my talk about love today. Keep your love growing strong. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm going to be quiet now for a minute, hand it over to Dr. Perez, and of course take any questions.
See, we give them a few folks, give our folks a few questions. Excuse me, a few opportunities to ask their questions.
I know I kind of answered a couple as they were coming through. I got excited as I was seeing the comments coming through.
I have to tell you that this has been one of my favorite sessions. I really appreciate the comment about the 5 positives, and I wonder, is that something we shouldn't use on a daily basis with our colleagues and friends?
Absolutely. You cannot go wrong in any relationship by focusing on the positive. And if there is something that is, I like to say, area of development or opportunity as opposed to negative, but all relationships can improve. And if there is feedback that needs to be given that's an area of opportunity, make sure that it's surrounded and supported by 5 times more positives. And a lot of times the message is all about the delivery, and so whoever you're trying to share your message with will hear it better if they're hearing the positives too. And
we have one question that came in from...
Oh yes, related to the part of the brain responsible for love. So the neurotransmitters typically are the most extant in the scientific evidence of love or functional MRIs. Norepinephrine, dopamine, oxytocin, and then of course the endorphins. And then let's see, I think Emily, looks like you have a question. What can someone do if they attract undesirable potential partners? Wow, that is a great question, Emily. Okay, so the best thing that I can say, if you're working with somebody or if you know somebody that attracts undesirable potential partners, it's important for that individual to kind of take a step back and look at what is it that's going on with me that the energy is going out to attract these types of individuals, because it's a two-way street. So the question from Emily was, how do we handle it if somebody is attracting undesirable partners? And so essentially what we can do is take a step back and look at ourselves and think about, well, what are we doing? What is it about the partners that we're attracting and the negative patterns that keeps us coming back? Are there unmet needs? Is there some type of negative pattern that's been established in a relationship in the past that needs to be addressed? Is there something intrapersonally that also needs to be addressed? I had a colleague a long time ago, I was kvetching about love relationships, and I'll never forget it. She looked at me, and her delivery was just great because she said it with a smile, but she looked at me and she said, Shannon, she goes, you know this as well as I do, but you attract people that are about as healthy as you are. And so I thought about that a lot, and I did some work on my health, and then it did change because I changed within myself. And so I think Carla is identifying that with her comment. Yeah, looking at improving yourself and feeling more confident in yourself does attract people that also have those same qualities. So great questions. Just looking through to see if there's any other questions maybe I can answer. Make sure I didn't miss anything. What advice would you give to a client who continuously runs away from relationships once feeling starts to develop? This is from Madeline Pinto. So Madeline, what I would say is very similar to what I was just talking about, and that is to help a client kind of be introspective and look inside themselves to kind of process what is it that's going on, where is that fear coming from? Is it fear of commitment? Is it fear of intimacy? Is it because of some past negative event or trauma or dysfunctional relationship? But being able to explore what baggage may already be in place, because one thing that we do know is that life will give us baggage. We can just be kind of walking along, minding our own business, and boom, something flies at us, and then it's stuck to us, right? And then something else too. So life gives us baggage, and one of the beautiful things that counseling and therapy can do is to help us realize that and help us be able to put down some of that baggage and put down some of that fear to be able to be ready and open to an honest, committed, intimate, passionate relationship. And then let's see, I see a question from Tanya. In the case of divorced couples, do both parties fall out of love, and would this be attributed to the levels of neurotransmitters? Tanya, that's a great question. I think that the neurotransmitters drop off fairly early in a relationship. It can depend on the specific dynamics. Couples that are separated by distance sometimes have that passion last a little longer because the neurotransmitters still have, I can't wait to see that person, and there's still that buildup. But that level of endorphins and other neurochemicals cannot be sustained. And so that drops off, but that typically drops off fairly early in a relationship. So we'd have to look at how long a couple was together before the relationship ended. But there are many factors that can end a relationship, life circumstances. One member of the couple can, as you had put it, I think, fall out of love. Both can. In the role of the counselor, so a counselor that is working with a couple or working with an individual that's going through a hard time related to an interpersonal relationship, it is important to assess, are you working to keep the relationship together, and are both members of the relationship working to keep that together? Because if one person is looking to come to counseling to have as smooth possible as a separation, that's very different than coming to counseling to try and rebuild and strengthen the relationship. So it's very important, I think, to understand the perspective of your clients. And those things, the things that we talked about with Sternberg's theory, the passion can come back. It typically doesn't come back to the same level that it started off at, but it can build. Commitment can be reaffirmed, and intimacy can continue to grow over time. But it all takes work. And then let's see. What advice would you give to a client who constantly engages in unhealthy love? This is from Zoe. Zoe, I would say let's take a look at what's going on. Let's take a look at what patterns can we identify related to this. What are the specific elements? How can we operationalize? What is it that makes it unhealthy? How can we identify what's triggering that, or what some of the core issues are around that? Because knowledge is power. So I'd start off with getting the knowledge of what's going on and why are these patterns repeating themselves, and then we can work on changing them. Let me see. Let me just make sure I didn't miss any questions. I saw a couple come in at once. So Joshua, Josh, how much do you believe self-love plays on loving others and loving a partner? Excellent question, Josh. I think that love starts with ourselves, and that we have to love ourselves and the unique gifts that we have, and we have to respect ourselves and honor ourselves and care about ourselves. And when we're able to do that, and we start with that, with the man or the woman or the person in the mirror, then we can look outward. And then I think we've got maybe one last question, or one of the last questions. Is it possible to be friends with our exes? Yes, it is possible, and I continue to be pleasantly surprised by how many times that can happen. If respect remains after the end of a love relationship, there can be a friendship that endures. It's much easier when the romantic feelings are settled for both members because it can be hard if there's one member of a former couple that still carries a torch, so to speak, or has hopeful feelings when the other one does not. So it's very difficult to have a friendship in a fair and balanced way if there's still romantic feelings from one or both partners. But if that has passed and the former couple has moved on, especially if there are children or business or other shared life things that kind of necessitate continued communication, it's a beautiful thing to be able to maintain a friendship. So great question as well. Really great questions for this session, Dr. Perez.
Excellent questions. And I think you covered them all perfectly, and we can move forward with a little bit about our programs.
That sounds good. Sir, if it's okay, I would like to thank the group. I want to share that in just a minute I'm going to listen to the good Dr. Perez. I always like to hear him speak for a minute or two, but then I'm going to quietly step out of the session. I am here at the NSU's Orlando Regional Campus. There may be a number of you in this session that not only is aware that there's class going on this weekend that starts at 6 o'clock, but there may be some of you that are about to go into weekend class that starts at 6 o'clock. I am actually going to step into a class that I'm teaching on group counseling and kind of switch gears and talk about group counseling in just a minute. But it has been really fun for me to spend just a few minutes talking about this topic. I appreciate the opportunity. I really appreciate all of you taking your time to spend a little time talking about love. So with that being said, Dr. Perez, I'm going to cut my video camera and mute, but I'm going to listen in to you for just a few minutes and then quietly leave.
Well, again, welcome everyone. I know some of you signed in just a few minutes late. This recording will be available shortly, so if you missed part of the presentation, please just contact the organizer and we can provide that for you. Just want to talk a little bit about admissions requirements for specifically our counseling program, which is available online, or our mental health counseling program, which is available in Fort Lauderdale, Jacksonville, West Palm Beach, Miami, Orlando, and Tampa. So we begin with the online application, which is a fairly simple process. You would submit your email and save your password. There is a $50 application fee. You would be submitting your academic transcripts from all the schools you've attended, including a college that you may not have completed, but you have some credits from at some point. You would submit your personal statement, and this is one of the items of most weight in your application. We're looking for your professional goals, your assessment of your abilities, and an essay that should be right around 500 pages. I encourage you to stay away from artistic commentary, but more of your professional and what you want to be doing with this degree. You'd be submitting 2 letters of recommendations, and again, we're looking for professional recommendations, individuals that would speak to your ability to be a counselor in the future or a related field, and a bit about your academics. I'd suggest maybe at least one professor and perhaps someone that is in a professional capacity, so it wouldn't be necessarily a restaurant manager, but more of someone who is doing professional work on a daily basis. Some of the application deadlines that are going to be approaching for fall, July 7th is when we're looking for applications. We are pretty close to that deadline. If you've got a few documents that come in after, we do work with the student to be as close as possible. And we have additional deadlines for Jacksonville, Miami, Orlando, Palm Beach, and Tampa regional campuses. All that information is available on our website. This entire PowerPoint is based on materials that are available online. I'm going to be going back to questions in a few minutes. In addition to our line programs, we do have international students in Fort Lauderdale and some of our campuses as well. We have the Office of International Scholars that will be able to work with you if you're in that status. All your admissions documents would be sent to the address that you see in front of you, College of Psychology, and the electronic transcript email is down below. That's something that would be submitted directly from your organization, not from a student. If you need further admission information, you'd want to contact our admissions office, College of Psychology, 954-262-7563, 800-541-6682, extension 25763. You could simply email gradschool@nova.edu and we would be able to assist you directly. One question that's come on, what campus do you recommend for international students? I'd recommend the Fort Lauderdale campus. Also, our Miami campus is admitting international students. Not every campus can, so that you'd be in the process of obtaining a visa. So at this point, I just want to take any additional questions. Go ahead and send any questions that you have through the chat. One of the key points in going to graduate school is the affordability. A good percentage of our students do work with financial aid. I'd say almost very close to 100% are going to be working with this office, and it really is much more than financial aid. It works with scholarships, grants, student employment, veterans benefits, loans, and payment plans. So if you are online and you're searching, one of the key things that you want to look for is scholarship searches. There are small ones, there are larger ones, there's scholarships outside the organization, and it definitely takes a search, but the tendency is many of the scholarships that are out there are under-applied for. Of course, there is loan programs and additional sources, veterans benefits, student employment where students are working on campus. That's something that applies to international students as well. There are some opportunities for employment there. Federal work-study programs. I've had a number of students that are graduate assistants that work with a work-study program, and that helps. And payment plans. And how you apply for financial aid is something you're probably familiar with. FAFSA, that's something you could start right away as soon as you have a plan to go to school. The same process is used for other organizations, so if you're considering more than one institution, that's definitely one way to go. And here's our contact for student financial aid, financial services, and you can simply go right online, nova.edu, and just search for financial aid. That might be a little easier for you. And again, my name is Dr. Carlos Perez. We've just finished up our presentation with Dr. Shannon Karl. Again, if you came in late, this program will be available by recording. If there's any other questions right now, we're going to be staying on to answer any individual questions that you may have.